Hello and greetings, salutations. Welcome to the Historical Boxing Society podcast. Today we're doing a boxing profile for Denver Ed Smith. He was one of the English early pioneer boxers. He's number 40 on the countdown of pioneer boxers. One of the PowerPoints that I have in my profile is Chief Nemesis. Now, Denver Ed Smith's chief nemesis, I would say, is one Joe Goddard. And I wanted to start today with a little reading from a book of boxing where we talk about Bat Masterson and his involvement with the first Joe Goddard versus Denver Ed Smith bout. I will do an entire video on reading from that bout, but this particular article I just want to do standalone in Denver Ed Smith's profile, and we're going to do a reading from that right now. Okay, this is from the Butte Miner newspaper. Denver Ed Smith. Something about his career of this unique ring battler. Bat Masterson used his gun when he seconded the Englishman in his contest with the barrier giant. Denver, March 5th. Denver Ed Smith. What a flood of memories the mention of his name will bring to old-time fighter followers, particularly in Denver. Denver Ed Smith, the first two-handed fighter the American ring ever knew, in one of the best middleweight and light heavyweights of his day, as Denver Ed was nearly champion of the world at a time when John L. Sullivan was in his glory. The details of how Denver Ed Smith managed to get a grip on the coveted laurels of the mighty John L. are worth retelling. It came in this way. Sullivan had just returned from his trip to Europe, where he fought Charlie Mitchell in Chamonix, France. He was touring the country and appeared in theaters. When John L. reached New Orleans, Joe Goddard was waiting there for him. Joe was some fighter in those days. He believed that he could beat in his old foe, John L. Sullivan. When Sullivan arrived in the Crescent City, Goddard walked into his room in a hotel room one night after Sullivan had returned from the theater. Goddard held in his hand $10,000 in currency, and he offered to put up the entire amount as a side bet that he could beat the champion. Sullivan, of course, laughed at Goddard. Then he explained that his theatrical contract would prevent him from fighting for several weeks. Goddard was not satisfied. He left the room, and the next day he declared that Sullivan had refused to fight him, and that under those conditions that he was the world's undisputed heavyweight champion. Many upheld the claim of Joe Goddard. This line of conversation was swallowed by many people throughout the United States, and many of them really believed Goddard had a claim to the title, as John L. Sullivan was becoming rather inactive. Then came Denver Ed Smith, hot on the tracks of Joe Goddard. With him as a manager and handler was the renowned Bat Masterson. Bat forced Goddard into a fight with Denver Ed Smith. $10,000 was the purse hung up by the Olympic Club of New Orleans for the battle. It was widely advertised as the championship event, and Goddard was the favorite. At times, betting was 5-1 against Smith, but old Denver friends continued to bet all the cash they could get a hold of. Hundreds of thousands of dollars were wagered, and then on March 3rd, 1893, came the never-to-be-forgotten battle. Goddard was of the old school of fighters. He faced his younger antagonist with his left foot forward and his arms in the old position so familiar in the pictures of veterans of the London prize ring. Smith stepped forward standing squarely, with either hand within equal hitting distance of his opponent, and they went at it. Goddard, the great barrier giant, towered over his younger and smaller adversary to such an extent that the fight looked unequal from the start. Denver Ed showed signs of great nervousness, and along about the 10th round, those who saw the battle say he began to show signs of willingness to end the encounter. Then it is reliably reported that Masterson, who was in Denver's Ed Smith's corner, pulled a gun and told Denver Ed Smith to fight harder or he would be shot. Smith was more afraid of Masterson and the gun than he was of Goddard, and from that time on, the tide of the battle changed. Both men, bleeding from many wounds, battled on until the 18th round, when, after he had been rushed to the ropes and almost dazed by the onslaught of his stronger opponent, Smith managed to land a right to the jaw, and the Australian went down for the count of 9. After he arose, Denver Ed Smith was on top of him in an instant, and another smash to the same spot put the barrier champion down and out. Out he was because he was knocked out clean. Cleanup made by his friends. In the meantime, Denver was the scene of great excitement. Bob Austin's pool room was crowded throughout the afternoon and evening as the betting was heavy, and at times were 5-1 with Goddard as the favorite. Bat Masterson was given credit for the victory then and was accorded Denver Ed Smith. And when Bat returned here after the battle, he was given an ovation which equaled those extended to the President of the United States on some occasions. This defeat gave Smith the claim to the World Heavyweight Championship, meager as it was, which Goddard had claimed himself, but Denver Ed's claim was quickly spiked. He went to Chicago to fight an old one-eyed Conley. The Chicago sports wanted to have some fun, and after Smith had given Conley a severe beating, the referee gave the decision against Denver Ed Smith. A few days after that, Conley, while boasting over his claims to the championship, encountered Mac Hogan in a Chicago saloon and became so belligerent that Hogan gave him a trouncing of his life, as Hogan was never been beaten since that time, and he may well claim the title for which Goddard and Smith fought in New Orleans, provoking one of the most amusing situations in the history of pugilism. Smith afterward fought Peter Jackson in Chicago when the Negroes started on the toboggan. In the first 3 rounds, Smith was knocked down 22 times, but in the remaining 4, he put it all over Jackson and had the great Peter almost all in at the finish. Denver Ed Smith was handled in his first fight by William Muldoon, the famous wrestler and trainer. When Smith started to train, he weighed 176 pounds and was flabby. When he entered the ring against Goddard, he weighed 180 pounds, and there was not an ounce of superfluous flesh on his frame. This was one of the first instances in the history of the prize ring where a fighter trained up for a match. When Smith came to Denver, he was recognized as the middleweight champion of England. He had several fights in the East, traveling around that country with Charlie Mitchell, and then he came here and settled down. His residence here gave him the title of Denver Ed Smith, how he got his name. Ring in the Lanier Street Saloon. While in Denver, Ed Smith conducted a saloon in the basement of 15th and Lanier Streets. There was a prize ring pitched in the center of the ring, and bouts were almost hourly occurrence. Smith taught the two-handed method of fighting and became very popular. One of the most memorable battles in this part of the country was his defeat of John P. Clough of Leadville in the 1880s. Clough was the best big man ever turned out in Colorado, and in his day was to be feared by any of the top-notchers. Smith beat him after a fight which created no end of excitement over the state. Poor Clough, after going east and winning more laurels, came back to Denver and was killed in a street brawl. The sale of his horse caused trouble between him and Sheriff Frank Marshall. After leaving Denver, Smith went to South Africa, where he beat all the best men in his region. He was a strong and aggressive fighter with a wonderful two-handed fighting machine. His two-handed fighting style many found puzzling to his opponents and most effective from his point of view. When he returned to the United States, Smith remained for some time in Chicago and then went to Alaska. Today, he controls a very successful and valuable mines in Alaska. But the old-time sporting men of Denver will never forget March 3rd, 1893, the day upon which Denver Ed Smith beat Joe Goddard after Masterson had pulled his gun and forced the fighting. So as we can see, Denver Ed Smith certainly owes Masterson quite a bit of gratitude for prompting him to try a little bit harder and not give up and to bring out his true potential, as Denver Ed Smith would certainly never be on this countdown if it were not for his victory over one Joe Goddard. That catapulted him from just a pretty average career into a little bit above average, because his competitive rounds were so low. Probably without the Goddard victory, he would be classified as about a Class D fighter. But having the victory over such a high-level competitor as Joe Goddard, who was certainly just as equal as John L. Sullivan in my mind, prompts him way up the rankings here. So we go through Denver Ed Smith's profile now. Boxer number 40, England's Denver Ed Smith. He debuted in the year 1882 at the age of 17. He ended in the year 1902 at the age of 37. 20 years of boxing, but very low amount of bouts in that time frame. His biography: he started in England touring with Jim Mace and was considered the heavyweight champion after the Goddard victory. At least a partial merit to being a heavyweight champion, recognized in some circles. I do believe that, as far as I can tell, Jim Mace likely discovered Denver Ed Smith in England, and not much is known of that time frame. It's not showing up in newspaper searches, but I would venture to guess that Jim Mace discovered Denver Ed Smith and developed him much in the way that he did with Bob Fitzsimmons. So we have fighting style. His fighting style would be a scrapper, not scientific, as I would put Denver Ed Smith as the style of an awkward fighter. These are fighters that had a very unique style only to them. He fought low to the ground, much in the way, in a crouch, much of the way Freeze fought. And this made a little bit perplexing for opposing fighters to fight him, as his style was not very unique to many fighters. Next, we have competitive rounds fought. I have this at 46 rounds, which is very low. I said he had a rather sporadic career. My score for him, 12. That's about the score of many of these fighters that are on the low end of the Class C fighters. But in fact, he's got a victory over Goddard, which elevates him above the Class C fighters. Next, we have level ups. I have him as 1 for 2. I have 3 level ups there. Peter Jackson, he fought and he lost. Joe Choynski, he fought and he lost. Joe Goddard, he fought twice and he did win 1 time. So I guess it would be 1 for 3, counting both Goddard fights. His chief nemesis is Joe Goddard. He fought him twice and had very much success, as Denver Ed Smith was actually the very first person to knock out Joe Goddard out cold. Where I'm talking, he knocked him unconscious with the punch that he administered in their first encounter. Next, we have his biggest misses. There's a few names here. One would be Bob Fitzsimmons. Now, Denver Ed Smith tried to get a match with Bob Fitzsimmons multiple times. This wasn't really unique to Denver Ed, as Kid McCoy also tried to get a match with Bob Fitzsimmons, and he naturally gave everybody the runaround. The next missed would be, of course, James Corbett, who was giving everyone a runaround, and also would be Tom Sharkey, who fought in the very same time frame as Denver Ed Smith, and that would make a pretty spectacular bout, as that was one of the best simulation matches that I had, that I put all the fighters through, was Sharkey versus Denver Ed Smith. But unfortunately, most of those guys there, Fitzsimmons and Corbett, everyone was having a very difficult time trying to get matches with. And after the Goddard victory, Denver Ed spent month after month after month in the newspapers trying to get these big money matches. But nothing came to fruition, which of saying wasn't unique to him, as many of these fighters were getting the runaround. But in the meantime, he should have probably been fighting other individuals while he was chasing the big money matches. Next, we have a greatest achievement. His greatest achievement would be his victory over Joe Goddard, recognized as the heavyweight champion of the world, the first person to knock Joe Goddard out cold. That's something that's certainly noteworthy enough to hang your hat on as being a fabulous achievement. Next, we're going to do simulation wins. Now, these are only designed to give you an idea of what Denver Ed Smith is capable of. Now, just because he had wins against these individuals does not indicate that he won a series against them. I'm just trying to show you what his true potential may be capable of. We have Mike Donovan, 15-round win. Jack Bonner, 15-round win. Mike Schreck, 15-round win. Kid Carter, 15-round win. John L. Sullivan, 15-round draw. Dick O'Brien, 15-round win, split decision. Joe Goddard, 14-round KO win. Hank Griffin, 15-round win. James Corbett, 15 decision win. Jack O'Brien, 15-round win. Dan Creedon, 15-round win. Bob Fitzsimmons, KO'd, loss, round 7. Peter Maher, 15-round loss. Gus Rulin, 15-round loss. Future White Hope, Carl Morris, 15-round draw. Jess Willard, 9-round KO loss. And, of course, Tom Sharkey, 15-round split decision win. This is one of the very best simulations, as there is 4 or 5 knockdowns in that simulation. And, of course, Sandy Ferguson, 15-round win, and then he had a 15-round draw with Joe McAuliffe, who was a Class D fighter. So a little bit of a sporadic there in his simulation, but he's certainly good enough to beat several of the fighters right around him. But as far as leveling up into the Class A fighters, he does not have that capability very frequently. Next, we're going to do fighters born right around Denver Ed Smith. So Denver Ed Smith here, master years birth log. Denver Ed Smith's born in 1865. We're going to do just before and just after. See how many of these fighters he actually faced. 1863, Patsy Cardiff. 1863, Bob Fitzsimmons. 1864, Joe McAuliffe. 1865, Denver Ed Smith. 1866, Jack McAuliffe. 1866, Buffalo Costello. 1866, Joe Butler. 1866, James Corbett. 1867, Frank Childs. 1868, Dan Creedon. 1868, Joe Choynski. And 1868, Jim Hall. So all of those fighters around there, the only one I really see him facing is Joe Choynski, which is just a little bit younger than him. We have 1869, Peter Maher. He did attempt to face him, and that bout was rather insignificant, as it was a no contest bout. So as you can see there, Denver Ed Smith missed almost all of his contemporary peers there, which is a very number one reason why his competitive rounds are down and his score is down, as he was not facing most of the people born right around him. I think that Denver should have, at the very least, went through those beginning first heavyweights like Patsy Cardiff, Joe McAuliffe. He should have absolutely fought those guys. It's unbelievable that he happened to miss most all of them. So that certainly is a detriment to his career. Next, we're going to go through the newspaper accounts of Denver Ed Smith fights. So first, I just want to start here. So he started in 1882, likely discovered from Jim Mace. In 1883, these are notes off of the Cyber Boxing Zone. 36 minor opponents, and he had a draw with Charlie Mitchell in a London prize ring rules. I have no idea how Charlie Mitchell would have been able to get a draw with Denver Ed Smith. Denver Ed Smith would be custom made for London prize ring rules, as that's what he liked to do the most, is wrestle and maul and get in close and throw opponents to the ground. He gets disqualified numerous times for attempting to actually use these London prize ring rules in Queensberry fights. He is a little bit like Sandy Ferguson in that respect, as he has a very difficult time getting disqualified several times. 1884 is when he actually comes to America, so we have no actually documented fights of his English time frame. In 1885, he joins Jack Burke on a combo tour of America. late 1885, he has 2 fights with John Clow, which is a very tough individual. Clow died early in a street fight, as I stated. So he really had no chance to develop his legacy enough to become a name brand. But these include Denver Ed Smith getting a 6th-round knockout of one John Clow. I think his other match, he was probably disqualified, if I remember right. So, first 3-4 years there, not a real lot going on. I do have some notes that stated that Denver Ed Smith knocked out Jack Burke, which is not in the records. I don't remember the exact year that that happened, but I'm guessing it was in 1885. And it may have not even been a real sanctioned match, as I think they were sparring, but I do have that in my notes that he knocked out one Jack Burke. So next we have this first match of significance here. This is May 1886 against Dick Matthews. Okay, May 1886, Dick Matthews versus Denver Ed Smith. 21-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 28-year-old Dick Matthews. Denver Ed weighed 149 pounds, as he's got to be at his absolute lightest of his career here. And Dick Matthews at 168. Now, prior to this match, Denver Ed Smith had surgery on his hands for boils. I think it's a pretty strange thing to have boils on your hand, but I guess so he came in at a disadvantage during this fight. These are the notes. Round 1, Matthews pushed by Smith into his corner and knocked him over the ropes. This aroused Smith, who went after his man, knocking him clean off his feet. Round 2. Denver Ed Smith draw first blood on Dick Matthews. Matthews staggered Smith for a moment, but Smith soon recovered. Matthews finished this round with decidedly the better of the action. Round 3, Matthews opens the round, forcing Smith into his own corner. Smith changed tactics and pursued with uppercuts. Dick recovered and connected heavily on Smith, dropping him to a sitting position. From there to the end of the round, Smith sparred for wind, evidently trying to get his big opponent to wear himself out. So this is one of the few occasions where Denver Ed Smith is the lighter man, as he's a pretty big light heavyweight. Not in this match, though. Round 4. Matthews showed signs of being weary. Smith, at close of the round, appeared to be playing with his big opponent. Round 5. Smith forced action and drove Matthews into his own corner. Smith knocked him through the ropes onto the floor. Squabble ensued. After a great deal of angry discussion, the match was awarded to Smith. Matthews' eye was marked badly and his jaw was swollen. Smith scarcely showed a trace from the fight on his face or body. So this appears to be a pretty clean match for Denver Ed Smith. So the official results are a win TKO in round 6. Now, of course, Dick Matthews, I have him in my true potential of John L. Sullivan. He's one of the current heavyweights of 1887 time frame. As we see, this is in May 1886, as Denver Ed Smith will also run into John L. Sullivan. As we know from simulation, I got a draw. So for a short time here, Smith was trained by Charlie Mitchell. And I also have on my notes that Smith knocked out Jack Burke. So at this point here, this is in a little bit later, 1889, 23-year-old Denver Ed Smith. So at this point, Smith was trained by Jim Mace, a little bit of training, as it states there, from Charlie Mitchell, and he went on tour with Jack Burke and sparred with him. So these are 3 extremely high-level training sessions being done to Denver Ed Smith. I mean, those are all, as far as trainers and teachers, are pretty high-end. So his next matches of significance, February 1889 against George LeBlanc. This is 23-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 32-year-old, relatively over-the-hill George LeBlanc. Now, LeBlanc can be a tough fighter, but when he's faded, he's not so tough, as we're going to see here. These are the notes. Smith pounding George LeBlanc with both hands, as Smith was a perfect two-handed fighter. Having been knocked over and against the ropes, LeBlanc went down in the second and got up dazed. Smith rushed him across the ring, battering him with lefts and rights when police interfered. The match was called a victory. Second round win, TKO over George LeBlanc. That was February 1889. So now we're going to go through a couple of just notes here as we move along in Denver Ed Smith's career. December 1889, the first mention of Smith versus Corbett is talked about. So at this point, Denver Ed Smith's got a pretty high pedigree of, challenging. February 1890, that's 2 months later, Smith challenges Jake Kilrain. And then March 1890, Smith is scheduled to fight Pat Killian, which would be a spectacular bout. Wow. I'd love to see that. That'd be a really good simulation, as those two are pretty competitive, I'm sure, with each other. So next we have, so that was in March 1890. Smith was scheduled to fight Pat Killian. March 1890 is a Peter Jackson bout. Now this made headlines later on in the newspapers, as they are indicating that Smith really came on in the last 2 rounds of the 5-round bout. So these are the actual notes of the bout, and we're going to go through them here. So let's see here. 25-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 28-year-old, the Australian champion, Peter Jackson. Round 1. Jackson had Smith very groggy by round's end. Round 2. Jackson took it easy, not wishing to deprive the crowd of its money's worth. Round 3. Jackson punches man mainly around the ring, dropping him 12 times in a ring. Smith replied with repeated clinching nonstop as he attempted to try and hold on and make himself through the round. Round 4, Jackson allowed his man to recover, which is, we see this is not a particularly serious match, but I guess he did knock him down 12 times there. Round 5, Jackson refused to knock his man out. So by that newspaper accounts, it's not saying that Denver Ed Smith did much of anything, but I can show you some newspaper clips right here where it talks about the article, and it was stating the last 2 rounds that in fact Denver Ed Smith, after being knocked down 22 times, proved to finish the match pretty strong, going at Jackson. And this is one of the most redeeming qualities of Denver Ed Smith that makes him one of the premier heavyweights here, is very much like Kid Carter. His recovery ability, I mean, he was knocked down 22 times there, and no quitting him, and he just keeps coming back. And he was pretty good at taking a punishment. So it's going to prove to be valuable for Smith throughout his career, as many times, just like Kid Carter, you're turning a sure defeat via knockdown into a victory. And almost all the simulations where Smith is able to win these matches, it's a given that he's going to probably go down once or twice a match, because his defense is not good enough to avoid knockdowns. But knockdowns aren't really affecting him too much, as he's able to come back from knockdowns very, very good, much like Fitzsimmons. So next we have in our notes, June 1890, so there's a few months later, Smith spars with Jake Kilrain. I mean, that should have actually really been a match, Denver Ed Smith versus Jake Kilrain. Smith, of course, would be rated a lot higher than Kilrain was, and I think he would probably beat him in a match there. So just in the fall here, November 1890, the famous George Godfrey match. And I do believe I have a video of this entire match on there. This was one of the all-time classics, and the results of the match were lost TKO in round 23. This is where he absolutely had Godfrey beat, and Godfrey does, much like pulls his own stunt on him and does a superhuman effort in order to overcome adversity. So this is 25-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 37-year-old, right before he's ready to go off the cliff, George the Professor Godfrey. Old chocolate. These are the notes. I'm not going to get super elaborate in this because I have a video on there. So Smith fought very low. Smith was down in round 1 with a punch to the throat area. Smith had peculiarities about him which made him a hard man to size up for Godfrey, as he swung very low on his feet and made Godfrey difficult to hit the targets when he was aiming for him. The second round ended with Smith sucking wind and looking out of shape. Round 3, Smith had decidedly the best of it and was always leading. A big right-hand swing split the skin of George Godfrey's left eye at the end of round 3. Okay. Round 4, Godfrey was cool as a cucumber, easily held his own in the countering, avoided many of Smith's vicious leads. Smith brought blood from Godfrey's ear in this round. Those are the worst injuries. Ears. So it means his ear is going to swell up. Poor Godfrey. Round 5, Smith rushed in and raised a lump under Godfrey's eye, raising an ugly lump. Smith improved so much this round as he had the best of all the fighting. Round 6, both men were sucking for wind. Smith's left eye was closed, and Godfrey could barely see out of his right eye. So both men have an eye closed at the end of round 6. Round 7, every time Smith landed, he left a mark, and at the end of the call of time, Godfrey's lips were twice its natural size. The floor was covered with blood spots. The breasts of both men were red with crimson, and the referee planned no stoppage of the match, as it was going to be a battle of nutrition. Round 9, Smith tried the LeBlanc pivot punch and missed, and Godfrey just missed his chance to capitalize, as he barely missed Smith as he was moving away. Round 10, Smith came up groggy. Godfrey rushed him to finish him right there and now. He had things all his way when, until the middle of the round, Smith suddenly lunge and his left, right, and executed the George LeBlanc swing in perfection. Godfrey was dazed, and Smith, encouraged by his fans as they were screaming, went after Godfrey to finish him off. Time was called as both men fighting furiously. Godfrey did some clever work, but did not leave unscathed, as he had the best of the next few rounds. Smith knocked down twice in the latter part of the fight. The battle was for $2,000. $1,800 went to the winner. Smith tired down the stretch. So the results of that match was loss TKO in 23. Now what happened was that Denver Ed Smith his head came in contact with the brick wall, because it was one of the four walls, as there was a ring around the other three directions, but the fourth direction was a brick wall, and his head came in contact with it. He went down, and he was bleeding from the spot where he hit it, and the referee would not allow him to continue, even though he wanted to, but they could see that he was concussed, and they called the fight off. So he lost via TKO, even though he wasn't technically actually knocked out. He just made contact with the brick wall. So Smith absolutely had Godfrey right on the edge of defeat, and Godfrey snatched the victory away from him. So that was November 1890. So we have some more notes here. January 1891, Denver Ed Smith versus Joe McAuliffe mentioned. Now that would be a perfect match. In simulation, McAuliffe actually upset, or no, I think it was a draw against Denver Ed Smith, so it would be a very competitive match. March 1891, Smith spars 6 rounds. Smith versus Fitz was talked about, and Fitzsimmons won at $10,000 for the fight. So this was the first mention. So we had already seen a mention of Corbett. Now this is the first mention of Bob Fitzsimmons, March 1891. June 1891, another Smith fight didn't come off, and McAuliffe and Kilrain were both mentioned. These are one of the patterns here where he just goes through these extended periods of activity, and this is basically him taking almost the whole year off following Godfrey to try and recover, I guess, even though he's attempting to get fights here, but nothing is materializing. April 1892, Joe Choynski. Finally, we get a match in April or spring of the following year after a year off. So April 1892. Let me get the ages. 27-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 23-year-old Joe Choynski. This would be a level up for Denver Ed Smith. Smith had to the best of the first round. Had leads but no knockdowns. It was a Choynski fight. Choynski dropped the Cyclone dropped him to one knee. The blow was not really a knockout, but it badly dazed the Denver lad, as time was called. So 4-round loss, as this is only a 4-round fight. And it says Choynski got a knockdown in the last round, but Smith had the best of the earlier rounds, it says. So he's not quite able to beat a fighter of Choynski's capability. This, again, is where Choynski's saying that he was, the fiercest man he's ever seen, as he would just get more and more upset every time you'd hit him, which is common for the Denver lad. So now we're going to go to the following year, January 1890. Smith and Goddard were matched with a 10K match. Now this is a result of this is only because of that Masterson got him the fight, because he was having trouble getting fights, and Masterson booked it with Joe Goddard. Goddard, a 10-1 favorite. Smith is clearly outmatched, it states in January 1893 before the fight. March 1893, Joe Goddard, number 1. So a 27-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 35-year-old Joe Goddard. Goddard looked as fierce as a bull, waiting for Smith before the bell sounded. Goddard immediately went right after Denver Ed Smith. Round 1, Goddard lands on Smith's ear and draws blood instantly. Smith slipped down and took the full count. Immediately, Goddard he's the ultimate gladiator, just going right at him. Goddard's still pretty young in his career here. Round 2, a vicious exchange follows, and Goddard is rocked and staggered as round 2 ends, and Smith looks the favorite. Round 3, Smith's agility helped him a good deal as he dodged the wicked leads from Joe Goddard, but Smith was very agile in this match. Round 4, Smith lands on Goddard's jaw and staggers him again, both tiring very fastly as the end of round 4 happens. Round 5, the pace is beginning to tell on both men. Goddard seems a little stronger. Goddard had the shade the better the round in round 5. Round 6, Goddard, the aggressor, staggers Smith to the ropes. He recovers and jabs Joe wickedly. Smith hammers Goddard to the ropes where both fall on top of each other, and Smith getting the better of it. So they both go down. Round 7. Goddard comes out weak as he is looking for the toll is taking effect on him. Smith hits him 3 times and drops Goddard to his knees. He rises in time for the round to save him. Goddard, just like Smith, had the ability to go down and get right back up again. Goddard's always going to be expected to go down once or twice a match, just like Denver Ed Smith. Round 8. Neither hurried to the center of the ring for the scath. Goddard floors Denver Ed Smith, and after he rises, they come together hammer and tong style and punch each other severely as the crowd goes absolutely wild with excitement as it cannot believe the action of the two men. Round 9, a slower round. Smith is weakening from fatigue. So this is where the match is starting to swing in Goddard's favor, and Bat Masterson will soon inject himself into the match. Round 10. A few punches exchanged with a lot of clinching as both men seem to rest. So after round 10 is when Masterson threatens him with the gun he better start going at Goddard because of all the bets that were placed. As this has got a pretty large purse. It's a $10,000 purse. Round 11. The moment the gong rings, the men clinch to save themselves. Goddard staggers Smith, and Smith forced things and went at Goddard, but both were very weak at that time. Round 10. To 12th round. A slow round, both favored clinching and holding on. It was Smith's round. Round 13. Light blows were exchanged. Goddard knocks Smith down. Smith rises weakly, and Goddard tried to force it on him as the bell saves Denver Ed Smith from a knockout as he's reeling at the end of round 13. As we can see here, Smith is going to just do a superhuman effort to be able to pull this victory out of the jaws of defeat. Round 14. More furious infighting, and Goddard forces Smith around the ring, bullying him. The ref has much trouble separating the men. Goddard lands a good one, and again Smith goes to his knees. The sound of the gong saves Denver Ed Smith for the second round in a row. Round 15. Both men are very weak. Smith jabs Goddard wickedly, and he falls from the blows. The gong saves Joe Goddard from a knockout, as Goddard now looks the weaker of the two men. Round 16. Goddard comes out quickly and forces Smith to the ropes, as Goddard wants to end the match. Goddard is spitting blood and breathing hard and difficult. Both are tired, and there's constant clinching going on as Goddard looks swollen and red with claret flowing from his face. Round 17. Furious fight. The crowd cheers wildly for Smith, who has shown wonderful gameness and agility, constantly dodging Goddard's leads. Round 18, Smith is the aggressor again, and they mix matters up, and Smith knocks Joe Goddard down. Smith rushes him when he rises and hands a terrible swing on Joe Goddard's jaw, knocking him down like a log. Goddard was knocked out cold. He was unconscious in the center of the ring when the seconds came in. It took another minute to revive Goddard to get him to his corner. Smith is declared the winner. The time of the fight, 1 hour and 10 minutes of incredible action. Denver Ed Smith, TKO in round 18. As we could see in that fight, Denver Ed Smith was tired at the end of round 9, and he made it to 18, just showing incredible powers of recovery there, as he's down 4 or 5 times at least in that match. So just incredible. I mean, the fact that Masterson really made Denver Ed Smith's career there by getting him such a large victory. Otherwise, Denver Ed Smith would never have made it this far. So, March 1893, Smith discussed with Corbett again. Smith is touring and sparring with Peter Maher. September 1893, Denver Ed Smith versus Bob Fitzsimmons is talked about. 1894, not much happening. 1895, not much happening. At this point, that's 2 years there and at least half of 1893. So he's basically just about retired at this point. So he never really capitalizes on the Joe Goddard match. So next we have all the way into November 1896, which is 3 years past Joe Goddard match. Denver Ed Smith's completely rusty, out of action at this point when they have December 1896. So it's at the end of the year too. So he's like 3 years removed from action. Jim Jeffries just about. Joe Goddard, number 2. 31-year-old Denver Ed Smith versus 38-year-old Joe Goddard. Both really on the end of their ropes there. Goddard seemed to fight from a distance and no rushes in round 1. Round 2, Smith forcing again. He fought low and made him a hard man to hit with a very awkward style. Goddard stunned Smith with a big right hand, landing. Seeing his opening, he went at Smith in cyclone fashion. Smith makes it through round 3 with a very fast fighting. Denver Ed's attempting multiple uppercuts on Goddard and rushes Goddard, getting a good crack while Goddard is reeling. Smith appeared tired and weak. So the results of the match: loss, 4 rounds, KO. Here's a few more notes here. Goddard was in much worse the plight. Round 3, no harm was done. Both appeared badly tired. The last round. Once again, fast fighting renewed. Goddard came up slightly the fresher of the two. Goddard, with a fierce rush, got Smith in his corner and attempted the finishing blow. Goddard landed an uppercut with such force that Smith came clean off his feet, hurling him headlong onto the floor. He came down with such a resounding crack that it was enough to split his skull open, as people were worried at the impact that Denver Ed Smith's head landed. So horrible, vicious knockdown the way he lands onto the floor there. So poor Denver Ed Smith, he was pretty darn rusty there and not super competitive, as he's clearly way past his prime at 31 years old. And finally, we have a 32-year-old Denver Ed Smith, completely past his prime, against Joe Choynski again. And this is, of course, where Denver Ed Smith, old, frustrated, decides he can't outbox Joe Choynski, so he attempts to throw him down. London prize ring rules, and of course gets disqualified. So these are the notes. Smith tried to headbutt and he failed. He was tired after 3 rounds. Smith fouled out after he had headbutted twice on Joe and after he was warned. Smith wanted to win on foul if he could not beat him fairly. So, pretty non-eventful match. Then we get talks of Steve O'Donnell. That would have been a really good match. Steve O'Donnell versus Denver Ed Smith. Yeah, it'd be pretty close in simulation. And this is December 1898. So it was the following year after Choynski. Let's see here. He would be like mid-30s, 33-year-old, 34-year-old. Denver Ed Smith mentioned with Jim J. Jeffries. So it's amazing that he had enough name ability just to try and maybe get him a match with Jeffries. Of course, that never happens, but Smith, I guess, was at least one point considered some type of a heavyweight champion after he beat Goddard, so it would be still a name match for Jeffries. So Smith lived pretty long in his life. I think he died in 35, maybe. Yeah, he was a fairly old man when he died. He pretty much started businesses, and his exit from boxing. He does kind of go to South Africa at one point, I think, and tries boxing some of the men down there, but I mean, he's officially like retired at that point. Denver Ed definitely fell right off the cliff of one of the 27-year-old is when I say a lot of these pioneer fighters go off the cliff, and he's no exception, just like Jack Bonner before him and several other fighters. Dick O'Brien, these guys at 27, they had too much ring wear on them. They were done. And that was the case, as he was completely shot when he fought Goddard the second match. But Denver Ed Smith, nonetheless, was a very competitive pioneer fighter, and I think he's got a pretty fair rating of placing him right here at number 40, right at the bottom of the Class B heavyweights. And he had a very close match with the next fighter that we are going to be doing in the countdown, which is one Sandy Ferguson. Thanks for listening. This is the Historical Boxing Society podcast.